I think what they're trying to figure out right now, like your local bank or your regional or wherever you bank, you have a sticky relationship with them. I mean, you don't go and change banks all the time.
Right.
And so they kind of know who you are. With the technology, they know your habits. The central bank, unless these two merge, and they're under the auspices of the central bank, they don't know who you are and they don't know what your habits are, but they need all of that information.
Yeah.
And therefore, for governments, they love it because hey, they can do lifetime taxes, right? They can just follow that whole string. But the central banks then have immediate control of their policy and to know whether or not that policy is working. And if they want you to consume, they just push those interest rates deeper into negative territory and inspire that. So while they can go direct to consumer, I think it's a little bit more challenging for them to do that, to have all of the data. What would they do? Absorb all of the data? I mean, you're seeing the mergers between fintech and traditional banking. We've been watching that for a while because of those two dynamics. The banks have the long-term sticky relationship, but the internet companies have all the data and know all your habits.
Yeah.
So bringing those two together is really powerful because looking at the cycles, there are just repeatable patterns. And so even though you can't guarantee the future, the most likely outcome if the same thing happens, then you want to be in that position. So it's good to understand them. So personally, what always happens at the end of a currency's life cycle when all confidence in the government and the currency is lost is they bring a component of gold into the new currency. Then that gets people to trust it again, and then over time they'll go ahead and remove it. So for me, I want to be in the currency that they're going to reset the fiat money to, which is gold. And then gold goes to its fundamental or its true value, which is really, again, you're about history. So what is the most important function that gold performs? It can perform a lot because it's used across the entire global economic system.
Mm-hmm.
But in my opinion, the single most important function of gold is to hold its purchasing power intact. And that goes back to what you were talking about and why you've got gold somewhere around 1800 or so at the moment. So what I'm in my accumulation phase where I accumulate silver for day-to-day barterability. That's its functionality for me. And I accumulate different kinds of gold for to do different functions. Like we're talking about real estate, and the biggest threat for most people are number one, the mortgage, and number two, the property taxes. And we've certainly been seeing a massive rise in property taxes.
Yeah.
That's how governments get the money, municipalities, et cetera.
And I expect that trend to continue.
I absolutely agree with you. So I'm just accumulating as well as putting in food, water, energy, security, community, and shelter. So that's the whole mantra. Now, when I see a cup formation, I mean, right now you've got income producing real estate here, just as an example, and you have gold and silver down here in value. But this will flip flop. And then my intention is to grab some of the gold and convert it into income producing assets, or even the cryptocurrencies that are going to survive this. Because I don't think anybody knows. I mean, Wall Street has clearly chosen Bitcoin, and you're seeing a wider and wider adoption. So that could certainly be the one that survives in that little flower that's allowed. But that doesn't really generate income. But the income producing assets like rights, water rights, mineral rights, income producing assets, real estate, etc. So that's my personal game plan. That then will generate income that I can never outlive. And then it's also a foundation, if it's set up properly, to transfer the wealth to my family, my children, my grandchildren, etc., who hopefully will take good care of
Yeah.
what I've accomplished. it's not just this one little piece. It's all of the products, the Wall Street products that have been sold into the pension plans and other retirement plans, the income from that rent that have been, turned into products and sold. So it's kind of like this massive domino effect. And you're right, it is hard to see. The other piece is with Wall Street buying up all the real estate, they're doing it on borrowed money. And at some point, that debt has to, well, number one, it has to restructure unless the language is in there. And what I also found really interesting with the transition from LIBOR to, in this country, SOFR, is that they were having trouble getting adoption. And when Powell had the opportunity with all the debt that they were issuing to force that market, he did not. He fell back on LIBOR. So that even goes to these contracts. What's the fallback language in the contracts? I'm sure it's in there that they can transfer from LIBOR to SOFR because it's too close to call. But if all of that leverage is in the real estate market and interest rates move up and that debt has to be either, well, you either have to service it, roll it over, or default on it, I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of real estate that comes on the market.
Yeah.
And once all the moratoriums are lifted, but hey, let's make it permanent. They can't make it permanent because right now they're subsidizing the rents and the mortgages that aren't getting paid. Bitcoin, they even said it on CNBC, where it used to be outside of the system and that's the way it was sold. Now it is completely inside the system.
Yeah.
So, and they can trace, you may have that where they can't get it from you. However, they know when you're spending it, but I know that if I hold it, I own it.
Sure.
And, there are some good things about the cryptocurrencies, but I think we've got battle lines that are being drawn between the central banks and the corporations and even some of the governments or municipalities that are starting to adopt this. And it'll just be an interesting battle to see than it is anything else. And power more than the money or anything else. But yeah, you would think that they would want that, but maybe the vision gives them more power. Because really, if they own everything, whoever owns it collects the rent on it and can dictate how much you're going to pay.
But who's going to invent
power.
the yacht and who's going to invent the new sports car and build the resort for them to go to and all that?
Well, I don't think you're still going to have those different levels in there, but the opportunities I think are going to be very restricted.